After sharing with you this real but kind of silly program, I hope you can understand pretty much everything that we've gone over so far in Python, including this new thing that I'm going to talk about, which is return statements. This is a program that displays the 2020 iPhone SE, my phone, specs in metric and in customary. So I could find two functions, and I put those function definitions up at the top. Look at my comment here that labels my function definitions, and I've got some nice white space separating out these sections. So I defined an inch to millimeter. Remember, I didn't use in because that's a keyword in Python. So inch and millimeter, those are my inputs to this function, otherwise known as parameters. And then I'm calculating the millimeters for each inch here, and then I'm returning the millimeters. So I'm getting a new number and then sending it back to wherever the call to this function was. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. In this one, I did the exact same thing, but opposite, but I didn't store a new variable called mm. Mm is my input here. I didn't create a new variable called inch, a local variable that's confined to this function. I didn't create that. I just instead said return whatever is calculated here. So in this one, I calculated it, sorted a new variable, a local variable, and then returned that local variable. You will see they both work the same way. This one takes up a little bit more memory. It's up to you about which one you want to use and which one you think is more readable. So down here, global variables, I've got a list of my dimensions. Those are all floats. So it's got 67 millimeters this way, 138 millimeters this way, and then 7.3 millimeters this way. And then the screen is 4.7 inches in the diagonal. So I thought that was kind of weird how they have millimeters and inches. So I wanted to kind of convert those. So right here in my main code, I am saying the dimensions in millimeters are, and then I've got this really nice for each loop. So for each dimension in the dimensions list, print that dimension. So it's just going to print line, line, line. And then the dimensions in inches are for each dimension in dimensions. I actually converted that dimension. I sent that dimension into this millimeter to inch function. So each dimension will go in there, and then it'll go in there, the next one, and then the next one will go in there. And then for each one that goes in this function, it returns the actual the inch value. So this call turns into that inch, and then it prints the inch value. Okay, so prints the inch value, whatever's returned. Sort of the same thing down here, inch to millimeter screen. I sent in this screen number, and then whatever is returned is the millimeter value. So the millimeter value is then printed. This version of Python, I think it's 3.6, I have to convert this number to a string. So I use the str function, string function, to convert these numbers to strings before I printed them. Plus, I'm using a plus to concatenate or join those two strings together, but we'll get into that in more detail in the strings lesson, which is next lesson. So let me show you how it executes. Let me visualize it. So first it defines the functions. So in my global frame, I've got these two functions that are defined. And if I were to do in the REPL, define those and then type in just the name with no parentheses, it would say, hey, these are functions and they're in a certain part of memory. So the definitions are in a certain part of memory. So that's what happens first. But you don't even really see that when you execute it. Next, dimensions and screen are both initialized. So the dimensions variable points to this list, and then screen is a variable that holds 4.7, the value. So next, it prints this. Sorry if it's a little small. It prints that statement. Then for each dimension in dimensions, it's going to print dimension. So you can see this dimension kind of dummy variable holds this first dimension in dimensions. And then it prints it. Then it updates, prints, updates, prints. Then it goes down to this statement. So the dimensions in inches are, again, I'm inside another for each loop. But now I'm going to jump up to this function definition because I called it. So this is the function call. I passed in the dimension that I'm in, which is currently 67.3, which is the first item in the list. And you see this new frame here is created because I'm inside this function definition. I'm inside the function. The code that's being executed is inside the function definition. So mm to inch is the frame that I'm in. And then this parameter mm, it gets the value of 67.3 in this case, right? So I passed in this value for this first version of the loop, this first iteration. And so then what's happening is it calculates it, and it shows you the return value is going to be this 2.6. And then whenever it comes back, this whole function call turns into that 2.6 value. So I could have formatted that a little better, but I chose not to at this point. So all of that turns into the return value. The function call turns into the return value. Let's do it again. So for 138, it's going to go into a new instance of mm2inch. So this is the same function, but it's a different version because I have a different argument. I have a different input to the same function there. Okay, so that gets converted to that, which is printed in this line 25. Let's do it again. I'm going inside mm2inch again with 7.3 this time. Convert that. That becomes 0.28. That's the thickness of the phone there. Okay, so let's skip all of that part. That's where I'm printing the dimensions. Now I'm printing the screen, and inches is, okay, 4.7. So it just takes the screen variable, converts it to a string. It doesn't even show that. Oh, hopefully I didn't mess it up. No, I didn't. So now it goes back up to inch to millimeter. So this function up here, doesn't really matter which order you put your function definitions in up here, but a lot of people like to put the first ones first. So here's that. The inch parameter is the same as the screen variable down here in the global space, right? In the global space. So this is a local variable right here that's defined mm. So that's not the same as this mm because it's in a different space. It's in a different frame. Okay, so this mm is converted, and then this is what's going to be returned as well. See, the return value is the same as this mm. So all this did was it created a new variable, and that is returned instead of just sending me the return value there. So it takes up a tiny bit more space in memory. Now, if you do this a million times, that'll probably be significant. But since we're not, either one is probably equivalent. So that's it. That's the whole thing. It printed that conversion. Hopefully those conversions are right. Hopefully these numbers that I got from the internet are right. If not, if anything is messed up or confusing to you, let me know in the comments.